Hi to everyone who have joined us today. Welcome to the University of Surrey Postgraduate Virtual Open Days. Wherever you are in the world, we thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are delighted that you're keen to find out more about postgraduate study at Surrey. And we hope that the events we had this week have been informative and inspiring. Now, before we begin our webinar today, which is all about applying for a PhD program, just a quick reminder to make sure you have visited our excellent event website where there are a lot of resources for you to go through, including our immersive virtual tour. So do not worry if you're not able to visit the campus physically. We have an amazing virtual tour that you can take advantage of on our event website. Throughout our webinar today, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. We will try and answer as many as we can towards the end of the session. And also, we will share a recording of this webinar on the event website from next week. So hopefully that all makes sense. And now I'm going to introduce our lovely panel for today's session. So we have with us Dr. Michelle Collins, who is the Associate Dean to the Doctoral College for the Faculty of Engineering and Physical Sciences. We are also joined by Professor Andrew King, who is the Associate Dean to the Doctoral College for our Faculty of Arts and Business and Social Sciences. And we have an actual PhD student, Tommy Richards, who is a PhD student in the Advanced Technology Institute. That sounds quite interesting. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Michelle as we have a little presentation prepared for you. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much, and hi and welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us today. So this presentation is mostly to give you an overview of what the steps are that you need to take when you're considering applying for a PhD with us here at the University of Surrey. So if these inspire any questions, please do put them in the chat. My esteemed colleague Andy will also be piping up if I miss anything important during these slides as well. So hopefully we can get you all the information you need to start your journey towards your PhD. So the best way to start your journey towards your PhD is to look into the different areas of research that you think might inspire you. So you might already have a very good idea of the type of research project you want to get involved with. And so I would start by going to our website where we discuss all of our different research programs, and you get an idea of perhaps what PhD programs you might think are interesting. And there may be more than one there that you feel like really speaks to you, so it's really worth checking out the range of research areas that we offer PhD programs in. And so then the next step, of course, is each different PhD program might have slightly different academic criteria and requirements for the entry to do a PhD with us. So it's always worth checking what those entry requirements are for the PhD programs you're interested in. And this will also include any English language requirements that need to be met as well upon applying for a PhD in order for us to accept you onto the program as well. So the next and actually very important step, in my opinion, is trying to find a supervisor that you think that you could work well with. So if you are going to do a PhD, you're going to spend, perhaps 3.5 years or 7 years if you're working part-time, working with this person quite closely. So once you've decided the kind of research you're interested in, it's good to also look at which kind of supervisors might be able to help you on that journey as well. If you go to our website, to the PGR programs, you can look at the themes and facilities section, and you can find links to sort of our different research groups and research centres, which also list the academic staff we have there. And we also all have profiles, so you can see the types of things we're interested in. If you do see particular academic areas and staff that take your, that catch your eye, it's really good to reach out to potential supervisors and ask them many questions, including, do you have any open PhD projects? Or if they have some already that you know about, and we'll get to how to look for those in a second, whether or not there are any specific requirements they have, and what type of work you may be doing, what kind of skills you might need. And supervisors are always very happy to be approached in that way, because it's good to have that sort of dialogue so everybody knows what the project is about and what kind of thing you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis over the course of your PhD. So do reach out. They are happy to be approached. If they don't email you back, do feel free to email them again. We do get a lot of emails, and so sometimes we may just miss you, especially during teaching time when we're swamped with things like exam deadlines, marking, and teaching as well. So do feel free to ping them a second time if they haven't got back to you. It probably wasn't intentional. And if you're applying for a particular studentship opportunity, do reach out to that particular academic as well with any questions you might have. Often you only have a short blurb of the project that gives you the highlights. If you have specific questions, I think it's always great to reach out to them and ask those questions to them as well. So in terms of checking for studentships, we advertise these in several different places, and so we have a bunch of studentships that are available already that you can take a look at and see if any of those match your interests. And we tend to advertise these on findaphd.com, jobs.ac.uk, and our own internal web pages as well. And this gives a full list of all the current studentship opportunities that are open, as well as some areas that may not currently have funding, but maybe are looking for students who are wishing to self-fund as well. And your studentship application is separate to your course application, so it's good to have a look at those as well. Once you've identified a project and a supervisor and you think you know what you want to do for your PhD here, you can go to the relevant program page and apply via the PhD program that you are interested in studying. There's always a research interest section, so it's good to include there any discussions that you've had with supervisors. This makes sure it's linked to the right academic, so they'll eventually see your application. It's much easier to send it to them if we know who you've been talking to. And also you may be including a research proposal, although this is not always required. In particular, if you're looking at an advert for a PhD program that is funded, usually there it already says what the research proposal is, so you don't necessarily need to write a new one. And often there it's just good to indicate who you're interested in working with and maybe list any sort of reasons why you're particularly interested in that project, just to remind the academic who's going to look at it about the conversation you had with them as well. Make sure to include any scanned copies of the relevant documentation that you need to provide, whether that's transcripts or other documentation as well. And you will also need to provide contact details for 2 referees who can write letters of support for your application as well. You can track the progress of your application through our Surrey self-service website, so you can see where it's at, if it's been distributed to the academics and so on. The time it can take to review these applications can vary. We often wait until after a few days after the closing date to make sure we've got any applications that were coming our way. And then we have to shortlist and interview. So it can take a range of times depending on the schedules of everybody involved in the interviewing and shortlisting process. Do try to avoid any unnecessary delays by making sure you complete the application in full and attach all your documentation. This makes it much easier for the admissions check to be performed, so it can be sent to the supervisors in question in a good amount of time. If you do have any questions about this, you can contact admissions@surrey.ac.uk and also the supervisor who you're applying with as well, because they can help find your application if it's stuck somewhere in the process. And if you are to get an offer, you can accept your offer via Surrey self-service as well. I think that brings us to the end of the presentation, and now it's time to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. I think that was a great kind of overview of what a prospective PhD student should be expecting when applying throughout the process. And just to mention that all of that is very, very clearly mentioned on our website in the postgraduate research section. There is application guidance, and all of what Michelle has mentioned is very kind of clear in the website in terms of step-by-step guidance of what the process entails in terms of applying for a PhD. So great to see we have already some questions. The first one I see here is about kind of entry requirements and how flexible they can be. And this particular student has mentioned that they're a mature student, they have a master's and a degree from some time ago. They're basically asking, if there's a certain set certain entry requirements mentioned on the website, let's say, how flexible can we be, and if students can be considered. I guess it's more like kind of more towards admissions in a way, but do you have any advice in terms of that? Do we look into certain things? Can we be flexible, I guess, in terms of entry requirements?
So I think from my point of view, they can always be flexible because things can vary from country to country, and of course going to different times as well in different eras when people were getting PhD masters as well. But I would always advise people to contact admissions at that email address. They are very good at being able to get back to you, and they are more aware of all the different levels of qualification, I think, than some of the academics are at the other end. That would be my advice. I'm not sure if you had anything to add, Andy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Michelle. And there is a certain amount of flexibility, and sometimes we will receive in our role a request that's been made either from supervisors or the postgraduate research director about whether it's possible to be flexible. So I very much agree with Michelle. If in any doubt at all, check with admissions.
Mm-hmm. I can add to that, each program, we have a very comprehensive kind of page dedicated to each program that students might be interested in, and a very easy to spot entry requirements section, which is very kind of easy to spot at the top of the page there. So if in doubt, definitely go on the website, see what the exact requirements are. Then if you feel that you are just about out in terms of maybe grade requirements, etc., our admissions team and actually the international recruitment team, which is my team, the team that I work at, we would be happy to advise you, to give you kind of that guidance in terms of whether you should be submitting an application or not. So perfect. So I see a couple of questions about studentships, actually. So someone asking, what exactly is a studentship? I think you touched upon this, Michelle, didn't you, in the presentation? But effectively, it's kind of a way to fund the PhD. And it's, from what I understand, it's kind of like a particular project, PhD project that you may apply for. And if successful, sometimes it's a fully funded studentship, which means your PhD is fully funded or partially funded. It kind of depends on the opportunity. Is that right, Michelle? Or do you have anything to add to that?
I think that's about right. Yeah. So the studentship itself is often a project that's advertised online somewhere. And yeah, it will have some sort of funding constraints. So it may be that it covers a stipend and full fees. Sometimes it will only cover fees at the home rate. So you may need to get a waiver in that case, or if you're an overseas student, or pay the difference. But it's usually referring to that kind of that project and the funding package that it has with it.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, we have a kind of a section on our website with studentships available, but you also mentioned a couple more resources in the presentation where students can look for studentships, available studentships for them. And then another question in terms of, if applying for a studentship, do you apply for this before applying for the PhD course? Any advice on that, Andrew or Michelle? I think we touched upon this in the presentation, didn't we?
I think it's sort of simultaneous, right? So the studentship is part of a PhD program. So, for example, I'm currently advertising a PhD in astronomy, and we have a PhD program in astronomy. So you would apply for that studentship through the PGR program page, and then you would indicate that it was in the research interest statement, which studentship you're applying for there. So so I think it's you apply for the studentship through the PhD course, so the two are kind of linked in that way. And the degree you would get at the end was a PhD in astronomy. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, again, Andy, is that?
Yeah. So I think I was going to say the same simultaneously, and it is variable what the studentship covers. So always check that in the details. If you're unsure about the studentship, there is usually a name attached to the studentship, like Michelle was was saying that she's advertising one at the moment. So if you were interested in that, you could always reach out to Michelle. Similarly, there are a few available in my faculty at the moment, which are more open studentships. So you would apply for a program in a particular discipline or area, and then you could apply for a studentship for that as well. So it's not a specific project, it's actually more open than that. So definitely worth having a look on the studentships websites about what's available.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess it's one of the things as well when, as you said, Andrew, when potentially contacting a supervisor or even the doctoral college, that's one of the things they can touch upon and ask and inquire to know their options, essentially. I saw a question as well in terms of kind of UK funded and overseas students, studentships and fees. So just to add kind of from our point of view here, in terms of the studentships available, it should be quite clear in the criteria if they're aimed at international students or UK-based students. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Michelle or Andrew, but it should be quite clear in terms of the eligibility criteria. So if you are an international student, you should be able to kind of see in terms of the available studentships which are aimed at international students and which would be a good opportunity for you as an international student to apply. Was there anything I missed out there? Yeah?
I think there it sort of relates to both the fees and sometimes actually eligibility for the project. So there are occasionally when we work with sort of sensitive partners, there's a requirement that you can't have any international student on that particular project. Those are quite rare. But the other way we talk about it is in terms of the fee value. So the overseas fees are higher than the home fees. And there are some constraints sometimes on whether or not a project can cover the full overseas fees or not. And there's always a case that waivers can be given out on a case-by-case basis. So even if it does say it's only covering the home fees, it's possible for an exceptional candidate that a waiver could be given. But that's sort of harder to tell and would require a conversation again with the supervisor to find that out. But otherwise, it's usually clear in the advert whether it's open to home or overseas students. And if it's open to overseas students, that usually means their fees would be covered as well.
Absolutely. And again, I see like lots of kind of these questions in terms of people who are interested in applying for studentships. Again, kind of the question here is if it's mandatory to have secured a supervisor beforehand, which I assume that it would be a big advantage if you have already secured a supervisor for a project before kind of applying for a studentship. That was my understanding. What does Michelle and Andrew think in terms of this?
I think if you're applying, sorry, Andy, you go.
So no, you go ahead, Michelle. Go.
I think it's beneficial to talk to people before you apply. So if you just apply and you've never spoken to the PhD supervisor in question, I think that it's not as good as if you've spoken to them first about the project. I think then they're aware of you and your application. They can talk to you about anything that you might need to know to help make your application more successful. Yeah. And you can also see, is that project open? Is this something I can work on? Especially if it's one like Andy was saying, of these more open-ended ones, you want to discuss that research idea you have with that supervisor as well, because you want to make sure it's something that the two of you can see going into a PhD, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And I just think it's better to reach out to a supervisor or potential supervisor first. And you can say, I'm interested in funding as well. It might be that person has a particular studentship sort of project, or it might be a more open one that you could apply for. And having that conversation with a supervisor or potential supervisor is going to be useful for you in that application process.
Perfect. I think that's quite clear in terms of the studentships. But again, we do have a dedicated section on all of that on the website. So please do take a look if you're still kind of unsure in terms of how this process works. Now, slightly unrelated question, but quite interesting, is what age range do we kind of accept in terms of mature students? I mean, from my point of view, from what I know as well, is that the campus and the university, we welcome students of all ages, and we I have seen certainly PhD students of all kinds of ages on campus. The university is very inclusive in that regard. I can't really say there's like a range, but I feel like at any point, if you have found your passion, or if you have found something that you want to look into in more depth and actually do that PhD project in, whatever age you are, whatever point you are in your life, our university welcomes students of all ages. Don't know if you have any specific examples maybe to add, Michelle, to that, or Andrew. Yeah, absolutely.
One of my first PhD students, I had two when I first started here, and one of them was a mature student. She'd had a long and successful career working for PwC, and she decided to come back and do a master's in physics at the end of her career, and then she decided she wanted to do a PhD, and so she did that with me, and now she's still working with us doing research as well. So and she's not the only mature student actually that's come through our research group. So I think we've had about 3 or 4 in the 10 years that I've been here, just in our little astronomy group. So I would say it's, the age is no barrier. So
absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
I completely agree. I was a mature PhD student myself, and I've had PhD students of different ages. Some retired, and they have a passion for a particular topic that they want to research, and so they will do that. So yeah, absolutely, very age inclusive at Surrey.
Yeah, hopefully, to our attendee who asked the question, hopefully that's kind of made you less worried in terms of applying for a PhD. Now, I'm conscious that we have actually a PhD student here with us, Tommy, and since we have discussed this whole kind of process in terms of applying for a PhD, the step-by-step process, Tommy, would you like to share kind of your experience of how it was to actually go through that process, applying for the PhD, contacting a supervisor, maybe tell us more a bit about what your topic is, if you looked into studentships, etc. I think that would be really, really useful.
Yeah, so I did my aerospace engineering degree undergrad at Surrey, and it wasn't until my sort of final year where I actually got the first chance to do some sort of research and sort of research study. And I found out during that year I very much enjoyed it. And during my final year, I was studying, basically looking at solar cells for space applications. And as part of that, I had a supervisor who was sort of guiding me along the way. And I think he could see that I was clearly enjoying it quite a lot, what I was researching and working on. And he would sort of raise the idea if I'd be interested in pursuing a PhD, because he knew there'd be some ideas in the future, and I thought I'd have a look at it, think about it. But after I sort of made that initial contact with that supervisor, and they sort of raised the idea of doing a PhD, I think I was then became very keen. It was then, I guess, of trying to line up a studentship. Luckily, one was just accepted on his behalf, so he was able to interview for that, and I was able to be one of the interviewees for that PhD. But again, as everyone has said about contacting supervisors, just putting your name in the hat, letting supervisors know you're interested in doing a PhD, I think is a really good first step, because I know funds and studentships sort of appear all the time, so it's a very good case to know that if a studentship does appear, a supervisor might be able to go, well, I know this person's interested, to be able to apply for it straight away. So after that was sort of set up and I was able to get a studentship, I then made the full application, went through a quick interview process where my supervisor and co-supervisor sort of made sure I was interested and that I had sort of some sort of relevant expertise. Obviously, they're not expecting you to be an expert in the field already, because that's hopefully what the PhD will result in. It will be the outcome of your PhD, was that you do become an expert in it. And I saw a few questions asking about, does your supervisor need to necessarily be an expert in what you want to study as well? They should probably have some background knowledge so they can guide you. But again, at the end of the PhD, the idea is you're the expert in that topic. So if they're the expert in that topic, it might not be a valuable PhD to do. That was sort of my process. And now I'm studying the same sort of topic.
Yeah, that sounds quite interesting, and also the fact that you actually managed to kind of secure a studentship, that's actually great, isn't it? And again, contacting the supervisor, we have to reiterate that point. That's very, very important. And since we have you, Tommy, there is a question there about kind of a typical day and how it looks like for a PhD student. Would you like kind of to share with us how is your schedule working? Are you on campus every single day? How much autonomy do you have in terms of how you plan your day? I think it'd be quite interesting to hear.
So I think it obviously is incredibly varied depending what PhD you do. I know some PhD students that I don't think I've ever set foot on campus, and I know some PhD students who are in most days. I'm usually in most days because I have a lot of lab-based work. So I'm on campus most days. My PhD is also with an industry partner, so I might be working with them or on site there for 1 or 2 days a week as well. But yeah, usually on campus, and it usually starts with a bit of lab work in the morning, and then afternoon is usually analysing those results or writing up a paper. As part of your PhD as well, you have a chance to do some teaching as well. So some days of the week I teach with the undergraduate labs, and that involves obviously the teaching side of it and the marking lab reports. So there's options to earn a bit of money on the side of your PhD as well. So it's a mix of teaching, lab work, data analysis, meetings. It's never sort of a strict schedule. It varies weekly. So it can be incredibly varied, but that's sort of my experience. But as I mentioned, it depends what PhD you're doing. Maybe you'll be in the library most days. Maybe you're a work from home PhD. There's lots of options.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that you for yours, you would need to be attending labs, I guess, that's definitely something that it would apply to everyone doing PhDs. There's people doing different types of PhDs where there's no labs involved, I guess. But it does sound like you do have kind of autonomy in terms of how you organize your day, which is a nice thing. I'm just seeing a few more questions here in terms of some are a bit more kind of, again, entry requirements and, for international applicants, it's prior publication expected, strong research potential, etc. Again, it really depends on the entry requirements for each kind of PhD program that you're interested in. We highly recommend that you take a look at the entry requirements page for the program that you are interested in, because we would specify if things like a prior publication are required, or if a research proposal is the main thing that would be looked into. So we do recommend that you take a look at the entry requirements page. And then some kind of like questions in terms of funding, again, in terms of self-funded PhD students, if they're eligible to apply for university funding or scholarships after enrollment. I mean, I think from what I know, having also spoken to PhD students, I think it would kind of depend, isn't it, if what is available, what funding is available after they start. There might be something available after they begin, but that's kind of not a guaranteed thing, or isn't always the case. I think Tommy did mention that you do some teaching, which is kind of part of your PhD, which is a great thing. But am I right in thinking that it really would depend in terms of funding opportunities after enrolling? It would depend on the program. Am I right in thinking that, Michelle and Andrew? Is that kind of correct, the way I'm interpreting that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's rare that we. Yes, I think what you've said is correct.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think from kind of friends as well who have done their PhD at Surrey, it's not something that we can guarantee. Potentially, might be something coming along, but it's not something that we can tell students beforehand. So, if you are
self-funded, I think it's somewhat rare. So,
you
certainly, if you were eligible, you could apply for it, but it's not. There's no, as you say, no guarantees there. So
perfect. Okay, so I'm conscious of the time here. I think we've primarily gone through pretty much everything. There is an interesting question there about having 2 supervisors. Is that something that is typical, having 2 supervisors for a PhD? I haven't heard about that before.
We have to have 2. You have to have 2 Surrey supervisors for every PhD,
right.
A primary and a co-supervisor. But I think there's also a question there about having an external. You can have an
Right.
external supervisor as well, but you would still have to have your 2 Surrey ones just because that's our regulations. But if your project required, like an industry sponsor, a supervisor, or perhaps it's just a larger collaboration with somebody working over at Reading, I don't know why I picked that out of the hat, but maybe there's some facilities there that you'd be using. So you could then, if it's a natural fit with the project, and some people even have international external supervisors as well, if it's a larger international collaboration. But you certainly have to have 2 Surrey ones.
Yeah. I mean, I, for example, I've technically got 4 supervisors because I've got 3 Surrey ones. And then I've got an industry supervisor as well. So yeah, I think as Michelle said, as long as you've got the 2 Surrey ones, you can then have an additional industry one or one at another university. Obviously, given that they would be happy to supervise you outside of probably what they supervise at their own university as well.
Perfect. I honestly, I did not know that. So that was something for me that I found out today in our session. That's super useful. Okay, so I'm conscious of the time. There's a couple more things. So very, very quickly, in terms of like how early to contact supervisors, I think the earlier, probably the answer is the earlier you can contact them, the better, isn't it? Because there is a process involved there in terms of the whole admissions process. So we always recommend applying as early as possible. And in terms of, what to go to potential supervisors with in terms of before applying and what things tend to make the stronger impressions, etc. We did touch upon what is needed to kind of contact supervisors during the presentation. And again, there's a lot of comprehensive information on our application guidance there of what is actually expected from you when contacting a supervisor. So please do make sure you check those resources out. So unfortunately, I think that is all we have the time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. So as mentioned earlier, a recording of this webinar will be on our event website next week. I'm conscious that there might be some questions that we didn't have time to get to. We will happily follow them up with you if you want to email us. So if you are a UK student, the email is study@surrey.ac.uk. Please email us. And if you're an international student, international@surrey.ac.uk, please email us if we didn't manage to go through your questions today. Don't forget, there's full information on everything happening during this event on our Postgraduate Virtual Open Days event website. And again, thank you to our panel for this very informative session today. I think that was quite a nice kind of quick overview of what is needed in order to apply for a PhD. So thank you to our panel and thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us. We wish you all the best. Thank you.